So I just wanted to quickly, for those of you who haven't got any, who haven't seen the post that's in either of the meetup pages for Our Ladies and Women in Machine Learning and Data Science, we've put up some detailed instructions on how to get set up either in Python or in R. So if you haven't familiarized yourself with where those links are, please do so, because this is going to be a hands-on workshop today, which is really exciting. So we are going to actually get to use this tool in R and Python, which is really awesome. So if you haven't done so already, just be aware of the GitHub page, which is Summer Scope. And in that is the Summer Child Py folder or the Summer Child R folder, whatever is your preferred coding language. And we'll be going through that later on in the meetup today. Next up, I just want to do some housekeeping for women in machine learning and data science. I'm going to put out a call for more organizers. At the moment, we're just a really, really small group, which was started quite a few years ago, and it's lost a little bit of traction. So I'm really hoping to get some really awesome volunteers to help me out with some organization. So if you have interest or passion or are working in the field of machine learning or data science, you want to support women and gender minorities in tech or in STEM, and you have time to attend organizer meetings that run about monthly or fortnightly, and help sort of run and organize and come up with ideas for our workshops, our talks and our events. I've got a Google form here, and I will send this out to all of the attendees later following this, so you can fill that out and let me know. In there, it's just a little bit about you and whether you'd be interested in joining. And on that note, I also would like to put a call out if you would like to nominate yourself, or if you know a really awesome person who you might think would be good to present for a Women in Machine Learning and Data Science talk. Just the next slide, Anna. I've also got a link to another Google form, Google Forms for Days, if you would like to submit and nominate yourself or somebody that you know for women in machine learning and data science. So they could present or give a talk or a workshop or anything else you might think would be interesting to our networks. So that's all of the housekeeping for women in machine learning and data science. If you don't follow us already, please do. We've got a Twitter page, and then we've got our meetup link page as well. And now I'm going to hand over to the lovely Anna to do some housekeeping for the Our Ladies Melbourne group. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Sally, and welcome everyone. I would like just to steal another two minutes and no more, and then I'm gonna leave the floor for Laura. So I would like just to announce another meeting that we're gonna have next Monday. So I think the beginning of the year has been really packed with events. So we're gonna have another one, which is gonna be online on the 7th of March. And our guest speaker will be Dr. Tyler Collier, who's going to tell us how to do analysis for others without going crazy. So I'm really looking forward to hear about mistakes in consulting and working with others. So for anyone who works in consulting or simply works with other people, that probably will be a really interesting talk. We hope to maybe go in person from maybe the next event or the one after, depending on mask rules. It will be really fun to come back to in-person events, so hopefully it will come soon. And another call similar to Sally, of course, like we're always interested to hear from new people. So if anyone would like to give a seminar, would like to practice public speaking in a friendly environment when there's no pressure to do anything, just like want to share something, you want to share something that you've learned in our package, or you want to give a workshop or simply a short talk, or some other topics like tonight or the one that we're going to have next Monday, we created this expression of interest form, which we are going to share soon as well. We're going to tweet it and share it everywhere possible that we can. So yeah, you can give us a heads up for when you would like to present, what sort of topics, and we're going to contact you then to organize that for you. And I guess it's always great to like put yourself up and try to give a talk, especially if you are new to art, and even if you would like to practice to talk about art in public, basically. You can find us everywhere. Since this is a joint event, you might not have heard about Our Ladies Melbourne before. We love art, and we run meetups every month, sometimes 2 usually one meetup a month. You can find all our past events and materials of our events in our GitHub page, as well as in our new website, which has been recently created. And this is it for my housekeeping. Yeah, we can find us everywhere: Twitter, GitHub, Meetup. We normally try to post all our videos on YouTube, so you can find all past materials and recording as well on YouTube. And now we get to Tuna. Before I introduce Laura, I would like to say a big thank you to Gizem and Nikki. So when Laura she suggested that she wanted to write a Python script and a Python package to run an activity during the meetup. I said, well, since we are a joint meetup, it would be great to have an R version. And when I asked the other organizers from the R ladies, they just jumped in and just said that they would be really keen to help. So that has been a really great experience. Thanks so much, especially Gizem and Nikki, for putting it all together. And now let's get to Laura. So tonight's speaker is going to be Laura. I'm super excited to listen to Laura workshops and talk. I've heard about Laura maybe 2 years ago from an ex-colleagues, and I've always wanted to hear more about her work. So I thought, why not inviting her to give a talk at our events? So Laura Summers is our local expert of AI ethics. Laura is also a multi-disciplinary designer, which does research in tech ethics, and she builds tools in order to promote fair machine learning. She's also the founder of the Bias AI, and which is the human behind ethics litmus tests, Fair Archive, and the Melbourne Fair ML reading groups, which she runs. So Laura is passionate about feminism, digital rights, and the designing for privacy. She also speaks, writes, and runs workshops talking about the design and tech. You can find Laura on her website and also follow her on Twitter at Summerscope. And I'm now going to hand over to Laura to kick off the workshop.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that kind intro. I'm going to let you leave that up there for another minute or two, just while I say hello to everyone and get us kicked off. Unless you want me to take over and screen share now, Anna, up to you.
Up to you, whenever you want to share.
I'll pick it up in a second. Thank you everyone for having me at this workshop. And I am a little sad that we can't actually be in the same space together, but also it's nice that we get to have people from different areas of the country and different time zones joining. So we'll try and focus on the positive. And I just want to flag that it would be really lovely if this could be as informal and conversational as the platform allows. So I will do my best to listen out for questions. If there's something happening in the chat, any of the organizers, please wave at me or even just jump in and say, hey, Laura, someone's got a question. It would be really nice to see if there's, oh, thanks, Linda. Thanks for that. That's where the repo is. And that links to the R one as well. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk for a few minutes just to do a little bit of scene setting. It'll be like the sort of bird's eye view of AI ethics, but I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that because it's such a big topic and there's so much to do. Oh yeah, Gretch, it's all ready to go. So you can share the repo as well. I'm probably not quite ready for more contributors, but I'm sure I can get there if people like happen to raise their hands. But yeah, yes, if you have questions as I'm talking, please flag. We do have kind of several ways you can run this quiz, which is the activity we're going to get to in a few minutes. So we're just hoping that people can like have a little look and double check that there's something in there that they feel comfortable using. So there's, you can run the Python script locally. You can hop onto the Python Jupyter Notebook in Google Colab, which is linked in that README as well. You can run the R Studio app, or I think Gizem said there's also a bash version of the R one. So there's lots of options. And if none of those work for you because you're not feeling super confident with any of those programming options, there's also a PDF up on the GitHub, which has the same logic in it. So you can just follow along and just read the text version. So I'm hoping that will give everyone an opportunity to at least like have a go at one of these ways. But as I talk, feel free to like hop on there and have a little look and see if there's something that you feel comfortable using yourself, so that by the time we get to the activity, we don't have too much setup to do, hopefully. And just before I start screen sharing and take this off the screen, I just wanted to do a very quick little poll of the group. So just give me a thumbs up if your primary language is Python, or if you're reasonably confident coding Python. So in the reactions, give me a little thumbs up. And I'm going to invite the organizers to try and do a little skim of how many that is. Looks like I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
This is for Python. Yeah.
Yeah, this is for Python. Yeah. Hopefully we mostly caught that. And also, if R is your primary language or you're reasonably confident programming in R, could you now give me a thumbs up? Great. Linda, of course, you're bilingual. Wildly unsurprised. All these smart humans on this call, it's so nice. Okay. And then the last one is, are you not confident in either? So would you like to have like the text only version, just so we can plan for you? Would you prefer not to do it in Python or R, but just the PDF? And it's totally fine if that's your preference. Okay, it looks like we do have a couple people for that too. Great, wonderful. Okay, so maybe Nikki, you can plan to have a breakout room for people who just want to do it in the PDF, so that we know that that's the easy, that's an easy place for them to go to do it, just the text only version. Okay, I'm going to start talking now and actually share screen. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right, can someone just say yes, you can see my screen? Yeah, cool, awesome.
Yep.
Hi everyone, welcome, thanks for coming. So yeah, as I said, I just want to spend just a few minutes scene setting and talking a little bit about, it's kind of like trying to condense like the last 5-6 years of my life, what I've been learning, thinking, reading, doing, into 15 minutes. So we'll see how much I can get into 15 minutes, but I just want to try and offer just a little bit of scene setting and a little bit of kind of framing, so that you know what we're going to talk about and why we're going to talk about it. So just, yeah, the agenda is I'll talk for 15 minutes, we'll do the activity, and then we'll have a little time to talk about it at the end. So pretty straightforward. So to start with, my favorite hot take to like break down already why we're here. I think both AI and ethics are really problematic terms. This is probably not surprising for anyone working in the field, but AI is sort of a suitcase word. It means everything to everybody. Marketers use it in one way, like Python programmers use it in another way, CTOs use it another way. It's just kind of this like catch-all word, and it's often also used to mean the things that we can't do yet, or some kind of magical like future tech. So I think AI is a problematic word. I also think ethics is a problematic word, because it kind of implies that there is one ethics, which I'm not really in agreement with. I think ethics are a complex, deep field. In fact, we have 2,000 years of philosophy on this topic. So I just want to flag that like these are both like complicated terms, and it's a little bit hard to even pin down what this means. And when you read like papers, position papers, white papers, or corporate statements in the space, you often like really get this feeling that there's a little bit of like wiggliness or like a sliminess in the way people use this term, and it doesn't make me comfortable. That said, I don't have a perfect here's a better term. It's just it's a hard term to like pin down. And just to offer my take, I think what we should be doing is thinking about the worst kinds of harms technological systems can inflict on people. And I don't mean just end users, because that's a specific sort of group and it's not everyone who's impacted by a piece of technology. So everything I'm interested in is, how do we observe when things go wrong? How do we recover from when things go wrong? How can we anticipate and like not go wrong in the first place? Again, like there's a lot of complexity in that, but that's kind of the area that I'm personally particularly interested in. I also think that we all know that the world is not fair and that the world is not just. and that, you know, you only have to turn the news on any given day and sort of get this like sinking feeling that the world is not only not fair, but it's getting more unfair. So perhaps this is a slightly cynical view, but I don't really think that aiming towards perfect fairness or perfect ethics is necessarily helpful at this stage of our civilizational progress. What I'm interested in is how do we make it less unfair, or how do we prevent the worst kinds of harms? And so that's what I've been working on, is thinking about ways to relatively rank and relatively assess risk. I'm sorry. There's a really fun paper that actually goes through, I sort of just highlighted very briefly some of the things I think people are doing with this term AI ethics. This paper goes into more deeply like some of the, what you might think of as logical fallacies that people are doing when they talk about ethics. So they talk about ethics as if there is one ethics and not, you know, multiple cultures, multiple religions, multiple backgrounds across the globe that all need to be considered and will almost certainly be fundamentally not reducible to a single rule or a single concept. That there's a bunch of them in there, but I like this one a lot. So the reductionism trap is talking about this idea that being like acting in a fair way means that we are suddenly ethical. And it's basically saying that we do this thing of kind of making these leaps between saying, oh, if I, you know, don't harm someone here, suddenly I'm ethical. Or if I don't do this one thing, then I've kind of solved all my problems. And it's sort of shrinking down the scope of what we need to worry about to a very small space. And I think that's, it's easy to do, and it's also like quite wrong. So I won't go into this in too much detail because we have a lot to cover tonight, but it's a really fun paper. And I think it, like, especially if you're like me and you've been reading news articles or papers or seeing people talk in the space and kind of just getting this like gut feeling that, oh, you know, we're not really thinking about this in a sufficiently rigorous or sufficiently like structural way. I think this kind of, these 7 AI traps of AI ethics, I think kind of like flag a lot of rhetorical missteps that people are making. And it might be helpful for you to like boot up and go, okay, oh yeah, that's what they're doing. And it's a little problematic. Next. So, oh yeah, I went too fast again. So obviously, just because I'm critiquing the language of AI ethics, it doesn't mean I think there's nothing to do. In fact, I've been a technology designer for close to 20 years, and I have been very much observing that the design choices and the technological choices we make day to day can like significantly improve or significantly harm or, you know, reduce the quality of people's lives. So I obviously very much believe that we can make choices and those choices matter. So we want to build some tech, and we want it not to propagate existing inequalities, social bias, and discrimination. Cool. I'm hoping this is pretty, you know, like non-controversial as a statement. But just quickly before I go to the next section, does anyone need any examples of how stuff goes wrong, or why we care about this, or if, you know, what happens when, you know, an automation system or classification system goes wrong? Because I have literally, you know, dozens of examples in my brain, but I'm also assuming that everyone already knows this stuff and that I don't need to sort of flag it again. So just, does anyone have any questions about why we should care, or what can go wrong? Or are we sort of fairly confident that this is like a thing we need to care about? We can keep going. Feel free to put it in chat if it's scary to like raise your hand otherwise. Ah, you would love some examples. Okay, great. Thanks, Anna. Oh, I've gone too far again. So what are some obvious ones? Oh, now that I've offered it, I have to like boot them up. Here's a good one. I was reading a paper by Virginia Eubanks called Automating Inequality. I think probably Linda, you know this book, it's pretty good. And she talks about a metric that was used to score teachers. And the metric was an attempt to sort of flag teachers that were, you know, not succeeding in like getting their students across the curriculum, you know, like looking out for kind of people who are not succeeding, or, you know, having like a lot of people like fall through the gaps essentially in their class. And it seemed like a good idea, but what it did was it looked at year-on-year progress. So what that means is if you have a class of people who come into your class and they're really struggling, they're really behind, you know, the agenda in terms of what they should know at that age group, it's very easy to boot them up, or rather it's very possible to like make a significant leap in their growth and their understanding, and therefore score very highly on this quiz. But if you have people coming in who are roughly, or sorry, on the score, if you have people coming in who are roughly like at the right stage of development, you're simply going to see an incremental step in their progress. And what that means is teachers who are actually very, very good were scoring perhaps less well than teachers who had, for some reason, were ingesting students that were really like behind, were really having a hard time. And obviously you can imagine that kind of phenomenon would be cyclical as well. So you can see that some years you just have students that need a lot more work to like make it up to scratch at the current pedagogy to make it through that year. And then others might like, you know, other years you might actually have much less work to do. So what resulted was some students, some teachers were getting fired as a result of this score, and really through no fault of their own. And really like people were outraged by this, and like there was lots of protests because people were saying, hey, this isn't fair, and these teachers are beloved and have been here for 20 years, and this is a failure of the automation. That's one small example. I'm sure everyone's heard all this stuff about self-driving cars. Like there's a lot to do with how we would automate. For example, how would the car behave if there's someone in front of it, and would it prioritize the safety of the person inside the car versus the safety of the person outside the car? Oh, there's just so many examples of things going wrong. There's a really fun repo called Awful AI, which is up on GitHub, and it just has like lists and lists and lists of these examples of things that can go wrong. But to try and like wrap it up, if you think about all the things that people can do to each other on an individual basis, we can encode those behaviors and replicate them at scale. So part of the reason I think that this period of time we're in matters, and this moment of like kind of building maturity as technologists, why it matters so much, is that if we don't like build the collective will and the collective insistence that this matters, and that tech not only has to be as good as people, but in fact better than people in terms of not propagating existing inequality, bias, and discrimination, then we run the risk of essentially encoding all of the existing unfairness in the world and making it incredibly hard to unpick. So I think the challenge of scale is really what concerns me. Oh, thanks, Lorraine. That is definitely the repo I was mentioning. Cool. Well done, everybody. Let's keep going. So I just want to flag, this is very much my take on the world. And like, this is, you know, you can disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But I see there being a number of things for us as technologists to do, and I'm just going to flag them very high level. And I wanted to make this list partially because I think a lot of us jump to the end of it and don't think about any of the stuff at the top. So this one, it feels a little bit weird. Name and formalize our personal ideologies. Like, what do I mean by that? When we think about ethics, when we think about fairness, there's a bunch of existing frameworks that exist, and it's quite helpful to look at them and say, oh yeah, I think I care about consequentialism, or I think I care about utilitarianism, or no, I'm a virtue ethics person. And I think that caring about people and like flagging, making that performative that you care about them, or that's part of like who you are, is like making that effort. That's actually quite helpful for like structuring our thinking. And it's important also because we have to talk about our moral intuitions, our ideas about ethics with other people. And if we have a shared language, if we have some kind of way to do that, that can be a little bit easier than just saying, oh, in every single circumstance, what do you think, Flora? What do you think, Nikki? What do you think, Sally? Right? Like that's sometimes I think forgetting that this sort of 2,000 years of philosophy exists is doing us a disservice, because we're not kind of like leveraging this existing vocabulary and this existing world of thinking and ways of approaching this work. I also think, obviously, like for people who come from any kind of minority background or have had a hard time in tech, you know that like it's often that person is the person who's being asked to advocate for, making things better, more diverse, more fair. But I do think that there is some capability building and advocacy work that has to happen. And, ideally this would be done by everyone equally, but if this work sings to you, like, this is definitely something you can like think about growing into as a skill set. I also think we need to do more sort of structural scanning, which is exactly what we're going to do in my quiz a bit later. So thinking about your system in context, not in the abstract. And what that means is basically, we want to think about systems as like one of many, you know, like any website, any app, any automation that someone might encounter in their lives. That's only one of sort of a whole world of technologies they're going to be exposed to. So it's quite good to try and step back and like look a little bit at, you know, the landscape and not just focusing on your one system as if it exists in a vacuum. Another one, I'll be flagging a bunch of tools to do this, is to map the risks of your system, like your socio-technical system. If you haven't heard that term before, it just implies that like no technology exists without people. So every technical system has like some interaction points with humans, often at the beginning and at the end, sometimes in the middle as well. So that's everyone who works on that tech. It could be support staff, it could be you know, developers, it could be lots of different people. I also think it's really important to rank and prioritize those risks. To make this really grounded, if you were to think about computer vision, like facial recognition, for instance, you are going to care about when it goes wrong, and you're always going to care, but certain kinds of harms or risks are much more existential than others. So for example, if you're some kind of chat app and you're putting, you know, like a filter on someone's face and putting like bunny ears on them, that going wrong, that like, you know, missing the shape of their head or something, it matters, but it's not an existential risk for that person. You could imagine the same underlying library could be used in a tool for policing, which is trying to match like suspects to crimes, for example. That's a much more existential risk. Like if you incorrectly flagged someone might be like a suspect in a crime, that's going to potentially cause them much more harm, much more damage to their life. And particularly if they're already someone who is over-policed, over-surveilled, or comes from a minority background. Another thing I think we always forget to do, or forget to even talk about, is to talk about implementation trade-offs. So in any given system, you can't have everything you want all the time, right? You know, you've probably heard this concept of like time, quality, and money trade-off. Like you can kind of have 2 balls in the air at any given time, but you can't have 3. The same is true for fairness and for responsibility of the technology. Like you're not going to be able to optimize for every single value you might want. So in order to work out what matters the most, you need to think first about which risks you care about the most. Another thing I think we need to do is develop strategies that alert us to failure cases. So when these risks do actually happen, when something goes wrong, we need to know about it. And this is another place that we almost always fall down. We just don't find out until someone sends a spicy tweet and is like, did you mean to call me an X? That doesn't seem right. And then the last one, which is where almost all the tooling and all of the thinking so far exists, is strategies to actually mitigate the risk of failure cases or to prevent them from happening in the first case. So this is like the AI ethics, AI explainer libraries, feature sets that focus on like trying to assess against a fairness metric. But this number 9 is where like most people kind of go to straight away. And I think that's kind of like jumping the gun a little bit. So I just wanted to flag that I think there's a lot of other things to do. And I won't say they're equally important, but I think they're all important in building up the maturity of this, this capability. Okay, so there's absolutely oodles of tools available now. I've given talks about this stuff for a couple of years now, and even back in like 2018, 2019, when I first started talking about fairness and responsible tech, I was sort of scratching my head going, what's out there? Like who's built stuff? But the good news is right now, there's absolutely heaps of things available. So I'm just going to give you the Cadbury sampler, which points you in some directions, and you can go follow them if you like. And I think Anna or Sally, if you would like to link my slides in the chat. Excuse me, all of these slides have lots of links on them, so you can like go follow them at your leisure when you like. So to kind of refer back to that big list of things to do, ethical frameworks, there's a bunch of just like kind of some of the most famous ones I've flagged here. virtue ethics, deontology. Utilitarianism is the one that you hear about a lot in startups. Ethical pluralism is one I like to talk about a lot, which is basically saying you think there's value in more than one framework and you want to hold space for them and try and, as much as possible, like consider them, consolidate them, like implement more than one. So I think that's a really nice kind of a holistic way of thinking about ethics, is that you think actually there's no one perfect framework, but you think of it more like a sort of toolbox and you pull out the right one for the right activity or the right moment. Another thing I've been looking around for myself that I made this project ethics litmus test for is the task of practicing ethics. So like getting that little sort of itchy feeling out of your gut and into some kind of more formal like form, whether it's a critique of a system or some research that you need to go do next. I'm not going to spend time on this because we just don't have time for it in the session, but this is an activity card deck, and it just offers you a bunch of prompts that like kind of help you like take the Rubik's Cube and twist it, which can help you get out of your head if you're a little bit stuck on whether it's okay or not. There's a bunch of design speculation and harm mapping tools. This is just a short list, but there's so many. I personally really like Black Mirror brainstorms. They're basically a way of saying, well, if this scenario went to like the worst possible outcome, what would that look like? What kind of Black Mirror episode would it be? Should we worry about how to, like, is it recoverable or not? And it's a little bit light and fun, but I also think it's like quite useful in like kind of practicing these skills of like design speculation and, trying to think through possible futures. This is a whole field. Again, I'm sure some of you are familiar with this, but data governance is another space where there's like more and more tools coming out. There's checklists. There's this command line tool called Dion, which has a bunch of really good things in the checklist. There's a really lovely data ethics canvas that Ellen Broad worked on, if you know, Designed by Humans. She's based in Sydney, but she's another person in the space who's really cool. And that that canvas is really good. There's, as I mentioned earlier, there's this whole field of explainability libraries. So these are things that are attempting to peek inside the black box, see whether or not it's interpretable, see whether they can come up with some ways of explaining how the decision that's being output was arrived at. I linked a really good explainer blog is the word on this Towards Data Science link. So if you want to check it out, I would sort of start there if it's new to you. There's a lot of variations coming out on SHAP and Lime and SHAP Ash. And again, I'm not going to get into it because it's sort of a whole deep field. But maybe my very, very top level like warning would be, I think we have to be a little bit thoughtful about the idea that like more like complex models can explain existing complex models. So I sort of think of this as the more models, more problems. Like if you'll excuse the dumb pun, more models, more problems, like issues. So like the more models we have to try and like, explain or unpack or peek inside an existing hard to interpret model, maybe the more we're going to like cause ourselves problems. And in fact, I've seen an academic from, she's from somewhere in Southern US, I'll think of the state in a minute. She actually had a really interesting pitch, which I think is kind of opposite to how a lot of data scientists think about this. She said, use your like no training, uninterpretable model to try and suggest features to explore. And then for your production model, come back to something simpler, come back to something where it's fully labeled data or where you're using even like a linear regression or something quite straightforward, but form that simple model based on the intuitions and the interesting kind of cases that came out of the more complex model. So I think that's quite an interesting, her name is Cynthia, something with an R. I will find her and put the link to her talk somewhere after this. So if people are interested in reading about that or listening to her talk about it, you can go check it out. But I thought that was quite an interesting way of thinking about the kind of issue of the uninterpretability of certain kinds of deep neural networks, like the ones that are quite hard to interpret just for humans. Then there's this field of machine learning fairness metrics. I think of this as the Lord of the Rings space, one rule to rule them all, or one metric to rule them all. There's a lot of people coming up with new concepts in this space. There's also a number of fairness metrics that have been around since the 50s. Again, this is a really deep field. If you're interested in it, I can give you some really good explainer papers on it, because there's some people who have done some really lovely, like, kind of assessments of the space and kind of just like walkthroughs at a high level, like a meta paper that does like assessment of other work. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this space. And again, like, the only thing I'll say very briefly about it is it feels very dangerous to me to assume that any one metric could possibly be equally valuable or equally appropriate in any given context. So yeah, I don't fundamentally believe that, like, we'll ever find a single metric that will, like, tell us if this was fair or unfair, or like okay or not okay, for any context you could possibly imagine. It just feels a little wrong-headed to me. That doesn't say these aren't useful. We just don't want to think of them as like the only tool available, and rather we need to sort of fit them to the context and fit them to the use. There's also a whole field of model monitoring. So this is looking for what's known as model drift. That's basically, does your production data change? Have your weights changed significantly since you release something into production? It assumes that your model continues to learn or change in some way in production if your model, or that your production data has shifted so significantly from your model that the accuracy has changed significantly, or that your outcomes are not as good as they used to be. This is important for just like ML ops, but it can also really flag when something is going wrong in the fairness and the ethics space. There's a lot of people working in this human and AI interaction space as well. This is coming up with sort of new components and new design tools to help tell people what's happening. I particularly like the Microsoft Hacks Toolkit. It's got a lot of great examples, and I've been finding it very useful in my own work recently. And I think that it's the first of its kind, as far as I know, where they're sort of gathering a bunch of examples from real tools and saying, you know, this is how you show model uncertainty, for instance, or this is how you build in a feedback loop to like see if someone needs to relabel a label that wasn't right. I have an absolute metric F ton of links. So I'm just gonna like say, go in here and have a look. If you want a really easy place to start, there's a lovely course from Fast AI called Practical Data Ethics. I ran a group through it a couple years ago, year and a half ago, and we had a really good time doing all of the course material and watching the lectures. It's all available for free online. But there's just tons and tons of resources in here that you can find, including most of the stuff I linked earlier. Right, so I want to sort of stop there so we can get into the activity. Oh, and also books. This is, you can see Linda's book is in there. Sorry, I can't help but show the stuff from my friends, but also this is a really excellent book. So yeah, just quickly before we hop into the activity, does anyone have any questions or feedback, or want to tell me my hot takes are terrible? And if not, we can just go straight to the activity. Can't see anyone raising their hand, so I'm just going to assume we want to keep going. Okay. So I've been working on this tool for about half a year now, but only in the past week and a half has it been turned into code, which is exciting. Oh wait, I can see some chat now. Oh yeah, cool. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to give you a little explainer for what the activity is. Answer any questions so that we don't kind of go off into breakout groups and get scared. We don't know what we're doing. We'll break up into some groups. I'm hoping that my lovely helpers from the meetups will have some thoughts about how many groups we should break up into, but ideally we want to be in groups of 2 or 3 people so that we can have a nice conversation and it's not too sort of intimidating to ask questions or like offer your opinion. Maybe actually something that would be useful just before we keep going is, can I just quickly flag, do we have a sense of how many people we want for each type of technology, or should I do another poll? And I'm asking Sally and Nikki and everyone who's working on that.
I've created 5. Oh, sorry, I've created 5 groups for R, 3 groups for Python, a group for Colab, and a group for PDF. So hopefully that should cover everyone. But if we're finding that groups are too big, I can add more groups.
Okay. I think that sounds pretty good. And what we'll probably do, because we have these like different language types, rather than letting Zoom like dictate where you go and send you out into breakout groups, we'll instead say, you know, there's going to be 4 breakout rooms or 5 breakout rooms called R, and you can just pop in and assign yourself to one. And if there's too many people, go to the next one. Sorry, that's slightly more arduous than just being assigned to rooms, but because we have these different technologies, I think that's going to be easier. Yeah, so let's do that. Oh wait, I just went through that, sorry. So yeah, we'll then work through the quiz and calculate a score, and then we'll come back and have a conversation about it. So that's pretty straightforward. So the way the score works is you basically answer a set of questions. There's a little bit of variable logic in there based on the questions you answer. So for some things you don't see certain questions, if you answer no or yes, it's just to try and prevent unnecessary double ups. At the end, you get a score that's calculated. The 99 is the highest score you can receive and 0 is the lowest score. And you'll see some information about the tier that you land in. It's also going to give you some recommendations about what you might think of as next steps. I decided we're just going to do the same scenario. It's going to be a toy scenario, just to keep it simple so that we're not sort of going in too many different directions. But also the quiz isn't designed to be pretty fast and pretty easy. So hopefully like once you've had a go, you can say, oh yeah, all right, I can do this again for the thing I'm working on at work or for the side project I want to work on. So the idea is that you can keep using it as often as you want, obviously. So hopefully you can give me some feedback at the end of this and tell me how useful it is. And if you, you know, have any strong feelings about things I've missed, for instance, or things that are, you know, overly focused on in my quiz. It's an attempt to have sort of a pretty structural look at the world that your technology is working in. So it's, you know, it's trying to take a pretty big view. Right, so we'll break up into groups. The quiz will just give you the score. Here's the scenario. So we're going to pretend like we've never heard of robo-debt, but that's basically what we're working on. We're going to have a scenario where we pretend that we're consultants and we're working with a mid-level government employee and they're doing digital innovation. So, you know, everyone's heard about digital innovation for government. That's a normal thing that we often see projects on. And someone sent you a proposal, and their proposal is called Improving the Efficiency of Recovering, Centrelink Overpayments. And they're going to, you know, say like, what do you think? Or ask you for some feedback. And what I'm hoping is we'll have some very structured feedback for them by the end of the scenario. So I realize this is a little bit of a difficult task because we have to try and sort of reverse engineer what happened and sort of put ourselves in the mindset of what would they have been thinking when they were designing this, not what do we know when we saw all of the terrible outcomes from it and all of the like awful impacts to human lives. So we have to be a little bit creative here and try and work out what we think would have happened and what those conversations would have been like. But again, this is a toy scenario. So, you know, there's no stakes if we get it wrong. It's more a way of practicing the quiz. So yes, we'll try to reverse engineer, the specification of the solution where you don't know what they would have done. So it's going to ask some questions about system implementation things. You just take your best guess. Like we all, you know, have some intuition about what the government might have done or how they might have been thinking about this. I'd also say you're very welcome to Google things. So there's a link here on this, how many people would have been processed, which takes you through to a summary of how many people are going through and getting Centrelink income support every year. You can go back to 2015 or 2014-ish, or you could do it for now if you prefer, but it's, we'll just sort of like look at roughly a year. We can assume that we would know the design implementation. So we know that they're going to send some debt notices. We know there's going to be some kind of web portal for people to look at, but we don't know what the consequences of the system are going to be yet. So that's kind of the pitch, is that we're trying to pretend like we don't know how badly it's going to go wrong, but we do have some ideas about what the system is going to be. So before we go into breakout rooms, does anyone have any questions about the scenario or like how we think about answering these questions? And I realize this is a little bit intense to put your hand up, so I'm also going to jump into the groups and help everyone, so no stress if you want to wait till then. Can't see any. Also, this is probably just before we hop into meet at breakout rooms. This is probably a good time to say if anyone doesn't want to do the activity or doesn't have, like, has to hop off, this is probably a good time to do it, because we're about to run into breakout rooms, so it's going to get quiet in the main room for a little bit. So no stress if you have to jump off. But if there's no questions, I think we can turn on the breakout rooms, and as Nikki said, we're going to have some dedicated to R, some dedicated to Python, some dedicated to the Colab, which is the online Python script, and one for the PDF for folks who want to do it through the PDF form. Oh, see you, Linda. Bye. So yeah, let's turn those on, and I'm going to invite everyone who wants to try the activity to assign themselves to a room. Me and the organizers are going to sort of hop around and make sure everyone has their questions answered and, you know, feels confident doing the activity, but hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward, especially if you've had a chance to like turn it on in the past half an hour. Thanks, Lauren. So yes, I will see hopefully everyone in a breakout room in a minute, and I'm going to stop talking so you all can jump in. Hello, your group is finished. Excellent. All right, I think I'm going to close the other rooms now as well, and that should give them a sort of countdown. Let's do it. Wonderful. How'd you go? Did you have any like serious sticking points where you like had strong disagreements about what was the right answer?
Yeah, it was, I think, around how we decide on you know, people's needs, like the shelter needs, physiological needs, you know, psychological needs, and you know, all that. So that definitely, I think every question made us think a lot.
That's good.
You know,
Well,
looking from every angle, and it kind of makes you think that how much study and thinking that you need to do before you even answer these questions. You know, you kind of need to know about your population a lot, so that you can, you know, prevent all of these things happening. But at the same time, I was thinking, because I think your setup was around how would you do this if you were designing it, or like how you can improve it. Then I'm thinking, well, considering the budgetary constraints of these type of government organizations, like what can you do if you're like, you can't set up a feedback loop, because there are not enough people who are, you know, working. There's not enough like you know, people source. So I think that's been like the most stickiest point in my mind.
Yeah. Well, look, that's certainly why the first recommendation in the quiz is do it with less people, because the very simplest thing you can do to do like less harm is to trial it with a small group of people first and find out what goes wrong. And that doesn't necessarily imply that you've designed any other feature set, right? You don't have to have a feedback loop. You don't have to have like an automated decision review. You don't have to do any of that other stuff. But if you just trial it with your first 10 people, even if you just get them to come into your office or, you know, like do it remotely and walk through your system with them and see what happens, that can, and, you know, like I'm a designer programmer. So of course, like there's a little bit of like sneaky UX like agenda here. But yeah, you could literally do like essentially guerrilla UX research with a group of 10 people. And that will be way safer than just releasing it on an entire population and seeing what happened.
Yeah.
This is the whole point of having focus groups when you're designing and like, right? Is it similar?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, Gizem. Can you
I hear
turn
you
it
very
off?
well.
Can you hear me, Anna?
I can feel like it goes a little bit up and down. It's like a little bit, there's some interference, but.
Sorry about that. Don't know what's going on. I was just thinking about like having focus groups. Well, while like designing this, I wonder if they had any focus groups.
Can't hear much. Yeah.
Maybe could you put it in chat just so I can respond? I'm really sorry, but I still didn't catch most of that. My apologies. Oh, thanks, Roll. Bye. Sorry, if people need to hop off, it's fine. We'll finish up in like another 5 or 10 minutes anyway, but if people do need to go, that's no stress at all.
I was saying focus groups.
Oh yeah, that's better.
Much better.
Okay, so I'm on my other computer now. I'll just switch.
One thing to say about focus groups is like they're kind of an old school marketing tool, and they often rely on like a group of people sitting together talking about something. And in some ways that can be interesting, but it can also be kind of like the opposite of what you want, because what you're observing in that scenario is how people behave in a group. What you're not observing is how they behave as an individual interacting with your technology. And in fact, people are notoriously bad at actually communicating what they will do in future. Like it's almost an impossible task to ask someone, how would you behave if like confronted with X? So it's a much better test to actually like put a piece of interface in front of them and see how they react and watch what their behavior is. And when you're in big groups of people, like a focus group, you get into this group think, and you know, it's tribalism, and it's all a disaster. We're like squishy humans, and we just want to make everyone around us like them, like us. But that said, like it depends on the thing you're trying to test for, but they can be useful. But I tend to be a little bit suspicious if what you're trying to do is find out like if something is going to go wrong or what will happen when it goes wrong. I'm not super confident that it sort of elicits that kind of information.
I think that was very detailed.
Yeah.
I would love to invite each group to just share like their score and roughly like whether it was what they expected, and you know, just a few thoughts about how they went with the process. Sorry, I didn't warn you about this in advance, but I'm hoping that there's enough people who are comfortable speaking in a group that's okay. Georgie, I'm going to pick on you. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's right. You go.
And Fiona, if you're happy to go first, that would be great.
So I'll just go quickly. So I was with Anna, Gizem, and Rule, and also Nikki. So we got, I think we got about 31. I did it separately, and I answered a couple of questions slightly differently, and I got 34, but we got around 31, and it was basically in the range of 21 to 40, which was the field of thorns response, which is where we really it was telling us that there were potentially a lot of risks with the way that we were approaching this. And it recommended trying it with a small target group first, as picking a small cohort and really following them and talking to them and observing how it went with them and being prepared to change based on what feedback we got. So we tried to, at a couple of times we found that we started to think with knowing what the outcomes had been, and then we sort of checked ourselves and went, oh no, hang on, we have to sort of be agnostic of that. So I think we did a pretty reasonable job. I think one thing I noticed was, yes, obviously you don't want a massive team of people going through and trying to answer this at the same sort of all together, but it was helpful to hear in a small group. It was helpful to hear how other people understood the questions, and they often brought different perspectives that helped you get a bit of a rounder view of the question you had to answer. I thought that was helpful because some of them you could go and find statistics or data to support your choice of answer, but other ones felt quite sort of subjective. So especially for those ones, it was good just to sound out some of our assumptions with those other people in the group.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I think depending on the context, you might even find that the ones that are like easier to pin down as like, you can support this with data, or like a little bit more wishy-washy, or a little bit more subjective, might even change. You might find that like that sort of floats around depending on the context of the tech. But that's maybe okay. Like maybe we should get more comfortable with like answering not perfectly objective questions, because that's also part of the fact that human experience is not perfectly objective. And that's kind of the waters we're playing in when we talk about fairness and ethics.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Maybe, sorry, I was going to pick on you before, Georgie. I don't know if someone in your group, or if you're happy to talk.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I was with Anna and Erica. We ended up doing exactly the same thing and just sort of forgetting ourselves and knowing what happened in the middle of it. But again, yeah, kind of tried to pull back a bit from that as well. I think our score was a little bit lower. I think we ranged between like just 20 was the lowest, and then up to like 22. So we kind of were on that borderline between the bottom two tiers. And that was me feeling like I was being very generous in some of my interpretations. So yeah, it certainly, but then yeah, trying to get your head space of like who would have created this tool and who would have been the people putting it in place, and trying to kind of get their mindset as well. But yeah, I think if you were using this to practice, one way that would be kind of nice would be to do it over time, or to have kind of you know, some kind of register where you can answer the questions, but then perhaps list a few assumptions and back it up for, you know, future people to come back and look for accountability down the track as well. I thought that would be kind of helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking, even because it is like a score and you can sort of record your answers, like something that could be interesting is, as you went through a product development process, like do it a couple of times and observe what's changing and see it, like, as you obviously the fidelity of your understanding of the system changes as you build it. So as your understanding increases, you might have clearer like understanding of how to like anticipate the outcomes. And obviously, like especially the last section, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is like it's a very long wobbly sphere of causality, right? Like we don't know, you could do something and then it could impact something, which, so you know, like it's a fairly loose set of questions, because you're kind of looking for this immediate flow on impacts. Like I put toxic chemicals in your water and now half of your population has cancer. Like that's a very direct effect, but there are obviously always going to be second and third order effects as well. And you could be like, it might be easy to anticipate those, or it might be like impossible to anticipate those. And that's also like part of the sort of gooiness of how to answer these questions.
And could it also like be a thing, because I know that there are 3 sections in your quiz, and it's sort of like for someone that needs to, this is sort of to understand where to tackle the problem, because at the end someone you know might see a score, but the 3 sections were representative for like the last one was like about the individual, like more about a psychological, the impact that it has on that, whereas other ones maybe they were more economical. And so I don't know if there are things that could be done to tackle different areas and to make the person aware of where the lacks are actually.
Yeah, I think even just having some summaries of like which section you scored most poorly on and like what were your least successful scores, it would be a really good enhancement to the section of recommendations. Like it's literally just dumping out a string right now, and I have to do some more refinement of it. But I think like even just having some weights, which is like these were your most risky answers, and therefore these might be like an intuitive short list of things to tackle because of that. Because you're right, like you kind of got this big list of things to do and it's a little overwhelming. So it might be nice just to have like a way of prioritizing them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, obviously, you know, I don't assume that people would be able to like plan for, design for, prevent every single thing this quiz like elicits. The point is to try and, you know, be aware, not be like completely naive in the way we think about our systems, and then do some work to prioritize and like focus on, you know, a very like thoughtfully scoped set of like specific harms or concerns that you want to work on. and like, of course, like, you know, there's no perfect world and we don't anticipate that we'd get everything right, but it's a way of going from, oh my God, the world's a disaster, to, okay, well, here's a few like discrete things we can do. Like, we're going to put our machine learning model behind a feature flag and we're going to turn it off. And there's some business logic behind it that we can like leave running, that we understand and is very interpretable. So if we have model drift, or if things go wrong, we can shut it down. The number of people who don't do that, like, it's really surprising. Like, and like, I don't mean, again, like, you have to think about the context of the machine learning model. Like, for some things, the risks are much lower, but for the things on people, you do really want to know that you can turn it off, and that it's, you know, it's a smooth process, and you just have to like press a button somewhere in build kite, or, you know, deploy a very small piece of code. You don't want to have to like scramble at 2 a.m. to like take your model down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's absolutely prioritization and decision making to do beyond this. This isn't trying to make all of your decisions. It's just trying to give you like a way of getting out of your head, right? Yeah.
But also, like, just going through the questions, it's already useful to think about each different parts. Like, already like getting the awareness of that question is just, yeah. And
it's a lot. Like, you can't keep everything in your head all the time. So assuming that because you care about this stuff that you'll anticipate everything that can go wrong is like also like it's too much for your brain. Like, just that was also the purpose of this, to be like, okay, I'm sure there's more to add again, but like, at least here's like a reasonably robust set of scans that we can do that I think, you know, prevent me from having to remember to think about this stuff every time I kick off something new.
I wonder if there's a way to retrospectively, for this example, go through and like back up all these questions with empirical data and then do an actual sort of confidence calculation with the population data. As like a case study or something. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I was actually thinking it might be worth doing like a more like statistical analysis of robo-debt, and like work my way through each of these questions and go, okay, you know, what were the things we knew went wrong? How many people did that happen for? How severe was it for them? And like, you know, plot some distributions and like really try and visualize this. And yeah, like, I think, you know, my ambition always outweighs my time, but that would certainly be a fun thing to like, even just to pick a couple of them. Like, that could be a fun thing to try and use as a case study for the tool. Sorry, there was one more group to go, and I'm not sure who was in it, so I'm going to open it up to the group.
Hi, yeah, that was our group. That was myself and Lynn and Sally, and we got a whopping 20.6. And and I think that the takeaway is like every question in itself, you know, it doesn't matter which way you answer it. Like, if you think of what would I do, I wouldn't do what I assumed that they did, but any decision that you are making actually needs a lot more information and a lot more thought and a lot more time to like be able to answer them not truthfully, honestly, like, you know, in a way that would, so you can make the best decision. Like, you, yeah, I just think there's every decision, every question itself could be pulled apart to look for more information to actually be able to answer them.
They're all like kind of pointers at a deep field. It's like consent, a whole discipline. You know, like explanation, a whole discipline. Like, there's absolutely a little bit of a Cadbury sampler vibe here, because we're trying to hit all of these topics, but at a very, very high level. And I think like it's good. It's nice to go through it in this kind of time frame, you know, like 30-ish minutes in a small group, because you still get to result. You sort of, you know, you flagged like the worst of the things, and it's not like a 60-page ethics report. And that's very much what I'm reacting to, is the only people I see doing this work are making like incredibly bureaucratic process. And it feels like a horrible experience for everyone involved. And you end up with this very long report, and it's really only intended as some kind of like legal protection. It's not really a decision-making tool for product. So what I'm interested in is like, how can we remember what levers we have to push on in product design and product decision making, and how can we like remind ourselves as we're going through these decision points or kicking off a new product or a new feature. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time and realizing that we should probably finish up. So I'm just going to very quickly share my screen because I wanted to invite everyone here to please. Oh wait, come back, please. Let's not do that. If you have more feedback on this, or if there's things I've missed, or if you disagree with my scores, which is completely legitimate because this is just like based on a lot of gut feelings and experience, but it's not really, I haven't really thought through how to more rigorously think about assigning these scores. It's pretty loose. It's not quite a Dolly quiz, but it's not much more than one either. Like I would love to like have people with like, you know, ideas about game mechanisms or score mechanisms, like give me some feedback on how to like think more rigorously about this. So yeah, would love to hear your feedback. And I would, you know, other things about how usable it was, if you could interpret the questions, if you thought they were too loose or too hard to answer as in a single question, like obviously they're big. And all that stuff is up there. But yeah, this is, if you want to chat to me directly, summerscope@gmail.com or on my Twitter @summerscope. I will do my best to reply to you quickly. And otherwise, I would really love to just hear from the group if anyone thinks they might use this again, because my goal was to make something that would be fairly easy to pick up and that you could just keep using. And so I'd love to hear if anyone thinks they would like to use it again, or if they have a project in mind that they want to go use it on now, or yeah, Gizem, hit me. Nice.
I was gonna say I'm definitely gonna use it. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, I like, because I guess like, you know, again, my entire vibe is like a tool is only as useful as the people who want to use it, right? So if it's too annoying or if it's too hard to pick up, then it's like it's dead in the water. So yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts on, can I make it more usable? Do you think it's like the right level of granularity? Do you want more or less? Yeah, anything like that.
I think the format that we did in small groups would be a useful exercise to do in, say, like your product teams. You've got your data scientists who have, you know, gone through, and you're going through that, you know, product design phase, or you've trained your model and you're about to deploy it to production as like a sanity check, get the main key stakeholders of the company in a Zoom meeting and get them to sit down and workshop through and discuss all the questions together even, or to each do it separately and then come back together at the end and discuss your scores if they're like wildly different, would also be really interesting as just like a sanity check before you do deploy something to prod, would be an interesting one.
Yeah, I was thinking it could be quite fun to do like a confusion matrix, but for like the score differences, like the differential between like people's scores. If you did it on your own and then you had like a group of 8 people, that could be kind of a fun thing to observe. Yeah, no, I love that. I think definitely like it's nice to do it in a team. I think if you were more confident in knowing your system, or you know, knowing the design decisions around it, or like felt comfortable with the questions, like you might be better to do it on your own. But if you were not really sure how to interpret the questions, having a buddy is probably a nice thing. So it might be the sort of thing that like as a product team got a little more confident, they might feel better about doing it on their own, but for the first couple goes, you'd want to do it in groups. Oh, thanks, Fiona. That's good to hear. Yeah, well, like it's open source. It's very much open for people to, you know, comment on or submit PRs for, or otherwise, you know, feedback to me in any way you like. But yeah, it is 7:26 and I'm aware that we're all Zoom fatigued, so I won't like drag this out forever. And I would like to, yeah, let everyone go and have their evenings and go have some dinner, I'm imagining. But yeah, it was really lovely to meet/see you all, and I hope you found this useful. And yeah, please do reach out to me if you want to talk about it anymore, or yeah, if you think about things that are interesting to scan for that I've missed, for instance. Like I would love to hear people's feedback on that, because yeah, I do think there's a lot to do like in this field, and you know, as technologists, as people who care about other humans, you know, it's nice to feel empowered and not feel like we're just at the whims of capitalism. I think we can do better. Oh, thanks everyone. Good job to you too. Thanks for your really great conversations. Everyone had such good conversations. So it was lovely to jump in and hear them. I hope you have a lovely evening, Monday night. Enjoy the last couple of days of summer, I think.
No.
Oh no, sad story. Okay, we'll just last couple of days of February. We'll just call it February.
Isn't it the last day of February today? Oh yeah.